Hello and welcome to the Gen Z's Workforce Wishlist virtual event. I'm Erica Pandy, business reporter at Axios, and I'm coming to you from Hoboken, New Jersey. Welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Axios.com. You can join the conversation today on Twitter with @Axios and the hashtag AxiosEvents. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll unpack how Gen Z employees are reshaping workplace expectations and how companies are innovating to attract and retain this young talent. Our first guest is the chief economist at LinkedIn, Karen Kimbrough, and she's joining us from San Francisco, California. Hey, Karen.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm glad we have you here to talk on this topic because, I'm looking here, 78 million global Gen Z members on LinkedIn. You don't really think of Gen Z as being on LinkedIn, but they're there. And that gives you a ton of great data on who these new members of the workforce are and what they want. Tell me a little bit about that number. When is Gen Z joining LinkedIn? What are they doing on there?
Sure. So as you said, we have a ton of Gen Zs on the platform. They're actually one of the fastest growing segments of members. And a lot of them actually joined, believe it or not, at the tail end of high school. They're finishing up high school. They're thinking about who they want to be in their new life. And as they start college, they set up a LinkedIn page. So it's really exciting for us because if you think about who they are, they're an enormous population of folks, even just in America, and probably going to be about a third of the workforce just in a few years' time. So with such a big cohort, they really have their own identity. They have their own, needs and wants and preferences about their career. And so hopefully we'll dig into that a little bit today.
Yeah, set the scene for me a little bit. What kinds of entry-level jobs are out there for the youngest members of the workforce?
Right. So when we do our deep dive looking at like where grads going, so now I'm talking about grads from college, we can see like what cities and what sectors they're going to and what skills are required. And what we see in our data is that some of the industries with the most entry-level openings are, no surprise, healthcare, retail, but also transport and logistics, software and IT. So a lot of the fastest growing sectors overall hold most of the entry level jobs. And many of these roles, for example, are, actually pretty interesting, I think. You have everything from being like a medical technologist, if you're in the healthcare field, to being, a software engineering specialist. And by the way, these are entry-level roles, so it's not as if you have to go off and get, a graduate degree in order to hold them. So lots of roles. And one thing I would say that I notice is that in this generation, they are a group that grew up online. They're very comfortable with devices. They're very comfortable with online content, creating it, watching it, traversing across platforms. And so they are often in roles that have a lot to do with online content.
So this is really interesting because not only are they a generation that grew up online, they're a generation that's entering the workforce during this great resignation. So they've got the power, basically. What is the data telling us about what they want, what they look for in a job?
Yeah, so they are extremely career path oriented. I think we ought to dispel the myths of that somehow they're flighty or entitled or not serious. They're incredibly serious. They want employers to invest in them. They know that their skills are portable. And the way they approach it is that a job today can lead to the job tomorrow, and that's your career path. So they're very intentional about this and willing to move around. And that's what we're seeing right now in our data is a lot of career mobility and sort of what we call the next play mindset, meaning they're here today to do this job, but they're always looking forward. What's the next thing to kind of add on to their career path? And so what we see, what that means is one, they're by far and away the most likely to be doing job transitions. And that's a little bit normal because they're younger and their tenure is shorter. But they're much more willing to move physically. They're more mobile physically than other generations in terms of moving cross country for a job. They're more mobile just in terms of role and willing to switch industries or careers. 75% of them say that they're open to switching industries or job functions, on a dime. And they're also more willing to take charge of their career through online learning. So, 86% of Gen Zers on our platform are engaged in online learning. They are using LinkedIn Learning to absorb content, to upskill themselves. They watch more hours of it. Again, back to being consumers and creators of online content. So they're very different, I would say, than Gen X and boomers, but also than millennials. Although people like to kind of mix the two, they are very, very different.
Right. I mean, the switch, moving physically for a job is one thing, but switching careers requires that upskilling, that reskilling. And it's long been a problem in the US that if you tell people to upskill, to reskill, people are like, I don't want to go to school, I want a job. But could that trend be finally changing with this generation? Are they willing to kind of get back in the classroom, even if that's the online classroom?
I think so, because I think this is a generation that's very autonomous. I really don't buy into the myth that they're all somehow, helicoptered by their parents to the point of like not being able to function. They're very autonomous. They're very intentional. They will move. We know why they move jobs. If they move jobs, it's because they want more compensation. If you go up the age scale to say Gen X or boomers, they want more challenge. They want advancement. But Gen Z is looking for financial security and they want investment. So they will be very deliberate in how they choose things. And because they're a generation that is more ethnically and racially diverse, they're more likely to be children of immigrants. They're very, very, I would say, like savvy about what the whole world looks like. And they want their workplace to reflect what their world looks like. So they want the diversity. They want to feel connected to a company that has purpose, that inspires them, because it's part of their identity. So that whole mindset is really a shift from, what we'd say older millennials who are now in their 40s or Gen X and boomers. Gen Z is really, really different. Now, what I think it could be really interesting, Erica, is to think about the idea of this multi-generational workforce. How do we get employers to move towards that zone where they have Gen Zs working side by side with boomers and Gen X? And that, I think, is going to be the future.
Right. I mean, you're touching on this a little bit already, but if I'm an employer, if I'm an HR department looking to recruit and retain Gen Z, given the data you've looked at, what are the things that employer should be paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say number one is, if we know, as I said, that Gen Z is looking for investment in their career, trying to create this career path, and of course, compensation, then employers need to think about how do they create viable career paths, mentorship, connection, that will keep Gen Zs in place, because they're likely to move around. So if you have a great Gen Z talent and you want to attract it and retain it, you need to create that connection in the workplace. They need to kind of identify and articulate. This is the employer. They need to identify and articulate their values and purpose in a way that's going to inspire Gen Zs to want to be there. They have been, thrust into their first job in the middle of a pandemic, because remember, they're all about at max 25 years old. They've only known remote work, and they want to get out there. They want to connect with people. They don't want to be at home alone, as one of the Brady Bunch squares or something. So we need to find ways to let them make that genuine connection to their company and the company's culture and mission. And so a lot of what we're pushing is this idea of culture and mission being first and foremost. The other thing I'll just add, Erica, really quickly, is that when we talk about what Gen Z is looking for, we can actually see what they're searching for. And searches on our platform for mentees, mentors, doubled during the first half of January of this year compared to a year ago. And it's people looking for that connection, looking for how to get guidance and navigate, because it's hard to start your first job in your living room. You need to be in the workplace, kind of modeling and observing behavior, mimicking it, and figuring out how things work. And it's really hard to do remote. So Gen Zs are looking for that connection.
I want to end by asking you about that remote work piece of it for sort of the professional Gen Z workforce. with Omicron cases falling, a lot of the companies that sent workers home 2 years ago are now starting to call them back. How does Gen Z fit into that? Do they want remote work? Do they want hybrid work? What are they, what kind of a work life do they like?
Yeah. So I would say everybody likes a little bit of remote, right? And it seems like the older you get, the more the remote you like, probably because the bigger the house you have, so the more space you have. But flexibility is a huge factor for Gen Z. They want flexibility. And they're more likely to, for example, engage in a job posting if it mentions flexibility, even more so than millennials. Now, for them, flexibility might mean I want to come into the office a little bit and have that hybrid experience. It doesn't necessarily mean just flexibility in terms of hours. But by and large, to answer your question, Gen Z wants to be connected to people, so they're going to want to be in person to some degree. They're not looking for a fully remote experience. They're social creatures like we all were or are when we're in our early 20s.
That's definitely true. Thanks so much for the conversation, Karen.
My pleasure.
And next, a View from the Top segment with Mia Boykins.
Thanks, Erica, and thank you to our sponsor, SAP Concur, for making this conversation happen. Now, joining us from Lincoln, California, is thought leader, travel and expense technology solutions at SAP Concur, Ralph Kalunga. Welcome.
Hello, Mia, and thank you for having me.
Let's start with the big picture. In your role, you have an incredible insight into trends that shape the Gen Z workforce. What are the top mega trends you're tracking for 2022 that you anticipate will impact the future of the workplace with these rising talents?
Mia, as it relates to corporate business operations and travel, the top key trends we are seeing are employee health, safety, and wellness, aligning with employees and travelers' sentiment, accommodating a hybrid workforce, traveler flexibility, sustainability as well, and certainly corporate social responsibility. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. And without question, racial injustice is a top cause US Gen Z unite around, followed by mental health. 8 in 10 Gen Z consider if a brand treats employees well as a critical or important purchase factor. And also some additional key Gen Z stats, according to last year's SAP Concur Global Business Travel Survey. 29% of Gen Z respondents worried that they would lose their job if they were unable to increase their business travel in 2021. And flexibility emerged as a top priority for younger generations in 2020. And this was particularly true in the US, where the majority of Gen Z business travelers, 59%, said they would rather have a crying toddler in the seat behind them than have no control over when they traveled. And Gen Z respondents also expect changes by their company to protect their health and safety while traveling. And if a company didn't meet their expectations, business travelers, especially those from younger generations, intended to act. More than half, or 58% of Gen Z and millennial respondents said they would ask to limit their travel or search for new positions. And nearly a quarter, 24%, of global Gen Z and millennials said they would search for a new position outside the company.
Those are definitely very important priorities to Gen Z. Thanks for that. A top trend at the top of everyone's mind is what an adaptive return to the office will look like. Talk us through what forces are shaping how companies can think through a return to work that works for all of their employees.
Mia, obviously, all employees' health and safety awareness will be paramount. Following the science and health and safety guidelines will be expected, and proof of vaccinations, will play a key part. Now, the pandemic taught us that we can work remotely from virtually anywhere. And this trend is the new normal as employees opt to come into an office at present only when necessary. There's been an abundance in cost savings monetarily and time-wise for both the companies and employees as a result of the new hybrid model. Companies have realized that their workers' productivity has also increased during this pandemic, proving that working remotely makes sense and really sense to the company bottom line. Now, companies must determine the true benefit of in-person work, including the impact on workplace culture, business deals, customer success, professional growth, and networking opportunities. And some research has shown employees are not eager to return to the offices. Thus, employers should focus on how they can make the in-person experience, for the workforce more worthwhile.
On that note, how can companies help bridge the gap between generations who are recreating their meaning of work and the generation where the new normal is the only normal they know?
Mia, every generation has had to deal with key events that basically define it, and helping your employees find that calm in the eye of the storm when it's happening is of huge benefit. Basically, helping employees cope with the stress, helping your employees understand that with every challenge comes opportunity. Thus, keeping one's finger on the pulse of your employee communities has never been more important across all generations. And focusing on employee sentiment plays a huge role in the success of your company programs, going forward. Now, consequences of ignoring employees' expectations could include, in worst case, them searching for new positions outside the company, which you want to avoid. With workforces split by generations, companies should consider programs and policies that can foster a sense of community between these groups. And gathering employee feedback will be essential to understand how to create a space for everyone to feel comfortable, regardless of age, rank, or working location. And no doubt, work-life balance has been upended during the pandemic. And as we reach the endemic phase, employers should consider how to adjust work-life integration policies and best practices to ensure expectations for every generation are met.
Thank you so much. And for our final question, we're always curious about the what's next. How can companies continue to put their best foot forward in this competitive job market?
Taking advantage or creating an innovative mindset at your job site is really important. As Socrates stated, the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but building on the new. And this is a moment of change. Seizing upon this once in a generational opportunity to adjust policies to the current business landscape, or simplifying or automating processes, or eliminating friction points for employees, and creating an inclusive environment where employees feel like they're being heard, are actually helping to make a difference in a positive way is extremely important. And research shows Gen Z say technology is not the solution to most problems. To stay competitive, companies must also look beyond the latest technology innovation to understand expectations from the workforce and talent pool and adjust policies to address their most pressing needs, i.e. workplace flexibility, company culture, corporate responsibility, and transparency, trust. And embracing employee empowerment versus draconian policies and processes is extremely important. Playing to the strengths of Gen Z, which are the most racially and ethnically diverse, socially focused, well-educated, and digitally native of all generations is extremely important. And that's really what companies should be focusing on.
It's been wonderful having a conversation with you and learning your insight. Thank you so much for joining Axios, Ralph. Back to you, Erica.
Our final guest is Marisa Andrada, Chipotle's Chief Diversity, Inclusion, and People Officer, and she's joining us from Newport Beach, California. Hey, Marisa.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. I mean, I kind of want to ask how you are. I feel like you and I are talking at one of the most chaotic times to be a chief people officer. There's so much going on. Tell me a little bit about that. How are you and how is Chipotle navigating this great resignation that we're seeing?
Well, I think about how we've navigated really goes back to 2018. That's when I joined Chipotle, and that's when we began our transformation under our new CEO, Brian Nickel. And part of getting into this transformation, it was really clear to us that we had to codify our purpose and our values, our purpose of cultivating a better world, and our 4 values that really bring that purpose to life. And that really set the foundation for the decisions that we've made, whether it's from a business standpoint, but also a people standpoint on how we want to move forward. And what we realized was coming out of this food safety crisis, so we joined after that, how do we help transform this company? And while people say it's a marketing and a digital story, we've always thought it's a people story. And we were intentional about creating a diverse, inclusive workforce from the get. When I say the get, 2018, and we laid down the foundation for hiring people who live our values, who believe in our purpose, but also made sure that we invested in our people starting at the beginning of 2019. So I think about all those things that we did about our purpose and our values. And then who knew that all of us would be navigating through a pandemic, unprecedented. I think the good news is all the investments we made and the chance for us to continue to live through our purpose and values really helped us navigate a time when there was no playbook. And our playbook was always go back to our purpose and go back to our values and what we stand for.
And let's hone in on Gen Z specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the group that joined the workforce in the middle of the pandemic. All they've known is this isolation, this burnout, remote work for a lot of them. How does a company connect with its youngest cohort of workers and keep them engaged when, in the case of your corporate workforce who are Gen Z, they might not even have met their managers or colleagues and they might be a year into their jobs?
Well, I think about, people who joined us in the pandemic. And I think, with Chipotle, we've got our 3,000 restaurants, and we also have our restaurant support centers. So the restaurants, everyone is working there and in person, but let's talk about the flexible or the remote-based work. I think the good news about Gen Z workforce, or this new workforce that's coming into the organizations today, is that a lot of them really resonate as consumers with brands that have a purpose that aligns to their values. So I think about the new team members that we have had the chance to attract into our company and join us. They already have that emotional connection as well as that values connection to Chipotle. So when they're starting remotely, sitting at home and, remote in through technology, I think one way they already connect is through the strong connection to our purpose and to the brand of Chipotle. Beyond that, when they come in, part of the interview process is all around, when I talk about hiring people who live our values, really making sure that when you join us, you're signing up for this purpose of cultivating a better world, but also, our 4 values. I'll outline them really quickly. The line is a moment of truth. So everything we do in the restaurants, from this amazing, sustainably raised, organic, real food that we deliver to our guests. It is about teach and taste Chipotle. It's all the details around how we create that food, but it's also a metaphor for if you're part of this team, you have the responsibility to bring others along. Third is authenticity lives here. Our food is real, and so are we. And we want people to bring their full selves. And lastly, the movement is real. We do what's right, even when it's wrong. I share those values with you because a way to engage our workforce that hasn't been in the office yet, I think that really resonates with them. And when they see their work come to life through their interactions with people we have our interactive tools, that's what really ties them to our culture. Although they may not be physically here, everything we do is really based in that, whether it's our strategies tied to that and the work that they are doing is tied to those things, as well as the investments we made in our people and our benefits.
I mean, it values and purpose used to be something that just lived on a tab on a company's website. But millennials, and even more so Gen Z, the survey data tells us they want to work for a company that they feel good about working for, that they believe in. And it's that sense of belonging that keeps them there, instead of hopping to another job. And I do want to turn to your restaurant workforce for a second here too. I would imagine a more seasoned, older restaurant employee would have an easier time navigating, which is what has been a really, really tough time to be on the front lines of this pandemic. What support and resources do you have for your restaurant workers, younger ones, older ones, everyone who's out there on the front lines?
Yeah, so for all of our restaurant employees, as I mentioned, in 2019, we began to make significant investments in our people. When we think about our vision for people, it's all around cultivating an environment where all of our employees can thrive, they can pursue their passion, and become lifelong leaders. And back in 2019, part of thriving is our workforce is primarily, 80-90% Gen Z. And for them, this is probably their best second side hustle, right? So they love having that side hustle, so they have that flexibility. But in terms of having that support where they can thrive, it comes in a few ways. First of all, we have an environment of well-being. It kind of is born out of our food safety culture and our commitment to well-being, that when people come into work, before they can even step to the back of the house, they go through a wellness check. And so that wellness check is not only around physical symptoms, but it's also emotionally, right? So especially during the pandemic, when we're checking your ability, if you're feeling well, not only physically to work, but emotionally, are you doing okay? So I think that's one thing that we did. But then I think about the benefits that we introduced in 2019. We introduced access to mental health care for all of our employees and their families living at home with them. As well, it was about their financial well-being and access to a financial coach online so that they can plan their lives, and beyond living paycheck to paycheck, how can they think longer term around the money that they're earning and how do they save and spend that in their life. And then if I think about as well, our commitment to their passion as well as lifelong leadership, our commitment to education. So we invested heavily starting in 2019, where not only is it access to free English as a second language classes. We have a lot of people where English is not their first language. We pay for that as well as for their high school GED for our employees and their families. But then beyond that, look, if they're working with us part-time, but yet they want to pursue something different, we also introduced our debt-free degrees. And so now we have debt-free degrees with 10 different universities, over 100 different programs, where they can pursue it not only in hospitality and culinary, but also in business and in tech, in supply chain, in agriculture, et cetera. All of those professions that might lend towards, our overall value chain at Chipotle, we provided that as well. So when I think about overall well-being, there's that rich access to benefits for employees where we do take care of them. And then, there's some really basic things too. And I'll get back to the basic, which is, hey, look, I think our employees love working at Chipotle, not only because of the purpose, they love the food and they love that we love our food, and they get free food when they're here, as well as, we're one of the few employers that if you're not feeling well, you get sick time right away because we don't want you working when you're not feeling well. So in the pandemic, I think that was also really helpful that we had those foundations in place.
The benefits, especially the benefits around well-being, are so key because we know that Gen Z really looks for that when looking for a job. And I also want to talk recruitment. I mean, this is a group that's online a lot more. They're on different platforms like TikTok. How do you get to Gen Z, meet them where they are?
Well, absolutely. We meet them where they are. I mean, there's the basic things. I mean, there's a presence for us all over social, whether it's Instagram and or Facebook. But then more importantly, last year, we did some fun things like we held a career fair. And I think we're the first ones to do this via Discord, right? So Discord is a big platform where we know a lot of our Gen Zers are. So literally meeting them where they're at. When we did that last year, I mean, we had rooms that were full, like people couldn't even get in because they wanted to interact with our culinary chefs when they were making guacamole. They wanted to talk to people. What is it like to work at Chipotle? Another way that we tried, which was just a trial, and it's something fun, just meeting people where they're at, is we actually did TikTok resumes last year. One of the early ones to go in, especially from a restaurant standpoint, to try that modality, for our Gen Zers to submit their application via TikTok. So we're absolutely trying to meet them where they're at. I think the reality is most of our candidates are actually customers that come into Chipotle. And so even today, so when you order ahead to pick up and you get your bag through the Chipotle window or you run in and get your bag, don't be surprised if you look inside your takeout bag and see, hey, there's actually an ad in my bag that says, you love this food? Hey, have it for free when you work at Chipotle. So definitely meeting people where they're at, whether it's through social media or through the food that they love.
Thanks, Marisa, for joining us and for this illuminating conversation on Gen Z.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Thank you all for joining this afternoon for another virtual conversation that has made us all smarter, faster. For more on workforce trends and Gen Z, subscribe to my What's Next newsletter by visiting axios.com/newsletters or on the Axios app. And to watch Axios' inaugural What's Next Summit on April 5th, visit axios.com/events. Thank you all again for joining, and we'll see you on axios.com.